Hello everyone, this is part 3 of What If Naruto Escapes Konoha to Rebuild His Life, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. Naruto giggled. He knew it really wasn't the time, but he couldn't help it. His companion was so cute. The 12-inch tall fox glared balefully at him. They were in Naruto's mindscape, standing before the sealed gate, and the miniature fox was getting very annoyed. What they saw through the gate was an odd sight, looking something like a sunset. The demon's chakra simply sat there, behind the seal, a sea of red energy. Naruto sighed. He had been hoping there might be a way to draw on this ocean of chakra, but with the fox now on his side of the seal, there was no one to push it through, so the chakra just slowly leaked out. As a consolation prize, he got to annoy a tiny demon fox. Within the mindscape, the demon's form was maintained by his chakra, so without it he reverted to the smallest and most efficient form possible. It also made him hilariously cute. Needless to say, the demon wasn't appreciating the humor. In what had hours ago been the hidden sound, the fifth Hokage surveyed the destruction around her. Lives had been lost, made, but Orochimaru was D. She turned and walked back into the temporary hospital, and started to tend to the ever-arriving W. With the D of their leader, the majority of the sound nins had immediately given themselves up. Unfortunately, there had been no sign of Sasuke, but it had been a perfectly orchestrated invasion. Except for two things. The first was the odd disturbance at the northern gate. 3 shinobi had been, one was still missing, but none K. She had examined them herself. The wounds on both Shikamaru and Chuji were from an unknown source, but Ino looked to have been C once across the back with some large sharp object. It wasn't a C designed to K, too shallow, and it showed too much forethought to be an accident. Chuji had she was waiting for one of the 3 to regain consciousness and give her a better picture of what happened, as Gaara had been very restless since the news of his sister's disappearance. The other problem, and honestly, the one really bothering the Hokage, was the discovery of the necklace. Hyuga Neji was in the hospital with a rather bad case of chakra burn from using chitin too much, and had mentioned in passing that he had found a necklace that looked exactly like the one Naruto used to wear. Now, when Hyuga Neji said, exactly like, he didn't mean, really similar to, like most people did, he meant exactly like. Tsunade had immediately demanded he show it to her, and he had. It was the same necklace. Somehow, weeks after his D, Naruto's necklace was showing up in the hidden sound. Something wasn't adding up. Tsunade wasn't sure what it was yet, but it was there, that nagging feeling that she'd missed something. She was broken out of her thoughts as a group of civilians were brought in. They had been in a building crushed by Manda. Temari was floating. Her body was weightless, surrounded by nothingness. Sight showed nothing but blackness. Ears heard nothing but cursing. Temari slowly opened her eyes, blinking into what felt like very bright light. Once she was mostly aware and started to take some notice of her surroundings, she realized she was sitting, leaning against something and couldn't move her arms. She was now waking up very quickly. Abruptly, the cursing she had been hearing stopped, and her eyes finally focused just in time to see a set of dark red eyes looking into hers. Suddenly, she remembered. She had lost in the forest, but then, her eyes widened in fear. There was only one reason to keep a shinobi alive and awake: tee them for information. In a panic, Temari desperate. Naruto grimaced. He knew what her initial reaction would be, but still. First thing, Naruto said in a rather strained voice. My name is Fushiku Naruto, and yours is. Temari glared. Screw you. Naruto's polite smile turned into a grin as he raised his sword and brought it down sharply. Temari screamed. Tears started to form in the corners of her eyes. Bastard, Temari growled. Your name. Naruto said, his grin still in place. Temari, she spat her name at him, like it was a curse. Naruto considered this for a moment, and then nodded before turning and walking into the woods. Don't go anywhere, Temari-san. He called over his shoulder. Once he was out of her line of sight, Naruto collapsed against a tree. He had never, in all his years as a shinobi, been the one in control. He had always been someone's subordinate. For the first time ever, He was calling the shots and it scared him senseless. He knew the act like kiss him trick wouldn't hold up for long, he wasn't that good at being mean. And anyway, the girl had already seen too much of him for releasing her to be an option, so he would have to keep her nearby until he thought of something else. Naruto resisted the urge to start cursing again. Now alone, Temari took time to more carefully examine her position. She noticed a moment later that her hair was loose, and pondered this before she tried to move her hands again. The bastard had bound her with her own hair ties. Her fan was also nowhere in sight, something that bothered her greatly as she was almost useless in a fight without it. Just as quickly as he had left, the bastard, as she now referred to him, walked back into her line of sight. Temari decided that she should start the conversation this time. I really hate you, she said, using her most menacing tone. To her astonishment and indignation, the bastard started to laugh at her. 30 seconds later, he was still laughing and Temari was thinking he'd maybe lost his mind when he finally calmed down and managed to respond. You hate me, Naruto said between giggles. Listen, little girl, there are a very large number of people in this world who hate me, and pretty much all of them are more frightening than you. Hell, I'm more afraid of my sword than I am of you. It was a minor point that Naruto was actually 3 years younger than the Sand Nin, but she didn't need to know that. Naruto suddenly became serious, but all that is really unimportant. What is important is that right now, you are in my control, and you are also very pissed off about it. Not getting any feedback, Naruto continued on, I'm going to give you a hypothetical situation, and you need to tell me what you do. Agreed. Temari glared. Naruto took that as a yes. You, he said, are a missing nin, one who has protected their idini so well. There are 3 people in the world who know who you are. Then one day, an enemy sees you, someone who could identify you. Normally you'd kill them, but something is preventing you from doing so. What options are left over? Temari had long since figured out where this was going, and didn't like the answer she was coming to. Seeing she understood his point either way, approached her while continuing to speak. So as you can see, there's no point in being angry at me since I have no more control of this situation than you do. I can't kill you and I can't let you go, so now that we understand each other, he see through her bindings. Within half a second, Temari had a hidden K in her hand and a half second later, she was on the ground, her arm twisted around backwards and the Any Temari-san, we will probably have to put up with each other for a while, so please don't do that. Naruto said, I need to go hunt for something to eat, you may move 20 feet in any direction, but no further, and must always have this sword right next to you. He then released her arm and casually walked off into the forest. As was expected, within moments he felt the sword sending him an image of Temari getting ready to run, so Naruto sent back an image of Temari restrained by fox claws, along with what remained of his chakra. Temari almost screamed again when she was about to run. Naruto walked back into the clearing. One more thing, Temari-san, the sword is intelligent. He paused, but I see you've already learned that. He again walked into the forest. Temari lay on the forest floor staring at the darkening sky, her arms stretched out and the sword lying silently next to her. You know, she said to it, I've always thought of myself as somewhat of an authority on shinobi, but this guy is something else. She sighed, I mean, 24 hours ago I was preparing for a minor role in an invasion, now, my team is probably I'm in a forest somewhere, prisoner of a demon-eyed boy who manages to be polite and terrifying at the same time, and being guarded by a sword. Amazingly, the sword remained silent. It's like I'm living a twisted nightmare. Temari rested a hand on her forehead as she felt a breeze, but suddenly jumped upright as she heard a voice behind her. Is it really that bad? I mean, I know the slitted red eyes thing throws people off, but I think terrifying is a little strong. And, he said, drawing the word out, I'll have you know that not a single one of your minions is D. Temari glared yet again as Naruto grinned at her. So what are we having to eat exactly? Temari asked annoyedly, she really was hungry. 1D rabbit and 1 box of double chocolate pocky, Naruto said as he grinned wider and held out both hands. Temari just hung her head. The boy was crazy. He had to be. She would laugh herself silly at him if he couldn't so efficiently. Come to think of it, even his sword had immobilized her without much effort. She wasn't even as strong as his weapon. It was these types of uplifting thoughts that occupied Temari while Naruto set up a fire and started to cook the rabbit. Food was eaten quickly and both were tired, so going to sleep early was the first thing they agreed on all day. Temari had the sword next to her, keeping watch, as she insisted Naruto stay a decent distance away even though they were just lying on the ground with their clothes on. They both soon started to drift, but Temari regained her senses enough to ask the drowsy Naruto a question. In that hypothetical situation we talked about, why can't I be the one who saw me? He looked over at her, and for 1 second, she saw something hidden within his eyes. It was gone in the next moment and he smirked at her. That's for me to know and you to go crazy wondering about. It was an answer typical of him, but Temari was awake for another half hour wondering about that momentary flicker of depths. The morning after the invasion, Tsunade went outside to watch the sun rise. She had been working all night, but their sea had been far lower than expected. Gaara was already outside. He too had been awake all night, but it was normal for him. The two stood silently and watched the first rays of light peek over the horizon. Gaara started to speak hesitantly. Hokage-sama, I have a confession to make. Tsunade didn't even turn her head as she spoke. Naruto's alive, isn't he? Gaara nodded. Tsunade felt her hands close into fists. She knew she couldn't fault Gaara. Naruto had been the one to make the choice to leave. Naruto had been here, in this very village. She hoped he had gotten out before the invasion, but couldn't even imagine what would have brought him here in the first place. Either way, she had no choice in what she was about to do. She purposefully strode all the way to where she knew Shizune would be planning diplomatic meetings for when they arrived back in Konoha. Tsunade didn't let herself falter, even once. She interrupted her assistant in the middle of writing a scroll to be sent to the various countries informing them of the Sound's defeat. Shizune, she said, fighting to keep her voice from breaking, as of right now, Uzumaki Naruto is hereby registered as an A-class missing nin, location unknown. Inform the hunters. Tsunade spun, ignoring the shocked look she was getting, and walked out, fighting her tears. Oblivious to his plight, the newly official missing nin was just waking up, feeling extremely refreshed. A night's sleep did wonders for his chakra supply. He glanced over at Temari and confirmed she was still asleep before taking a moment to think. At this point, he had two directions he could travel in, east or west. West would take him almost directly to Hidden Waterfall, but he would still be right above Fire Country. East was a long trip, but would take him to Hidden Cloud, much farther away from an enemy of Hidden Leaf. East it was. He needed time to decide what to do with the troublesome Sand Nin before he started looking actively for missions, and he had enough money to last a while, though he had lost his extra clothing. Naruto sighed as Temari started to stir. He really wished Itachi were here. His Sharingan could just awe the girl with their coolness and then she would do whatever she was told. That was one trick the Uchiha had never taught him. He felt a tug in his mind, and unconsciously gave a bit of chakra. He immediately heard a shout behind him and spun around to see Temari glaring at Sere Kirit. She turned to Naruto looking livid. Your sword just me. What? Temari was raging, a glowing red claw just. Naruto looked at her skeptically, but then he started to get a feeling of satisfaction from Kyuubi. Naruto pinched the bridge of his nose. He really didn't need this first thing in the morning. Okay, you. He pointed to the sword, speaking out loud for Temari's benefit. No manifesting unless there's a reason. And you, he pointed at Temari, don't give him a reason. Temari looked indignant and the sword was oozing smugness. Seeing as both apparently understood, Naruto continued. We're heading east as of now. We have no supplies and it's at least a day and a half to the nearest village. Temari, you are to keep the sword on your back at all times, and must always be within 30 feet of me, otherwise, I'll have you restrained and carry you. Temari suddenly had the feeling that the sword was leering at her. She managed to look furious and slightly embarrassed at the same time. Fine, she muttered, but I need something to tie my hair up with. Why? Naruto immediately asked. 2 reasons, she said annoyedly, it falls in my face, making it hard to see and looks stupid. Naruto pondered this for a moment, speaking as someone who has spent his life around whiny girls who spend all say on their appearance, your hair looks fine, and I'm the only one who can see it anyway. But if you're having trouble seeing, there's always the option of being carried. I'll be fine, she growled. They were soon moving through the forest at a fast pace, Temari wondering the whole time whether the first part of the bastard's last comment had been a compliment or insult. The news that Naruto had been registered as a Nukenin spread like wildfire through the Leaf Camp. It was quickly the most popular topic of gossip in camp. A great number of shinobi were already pushing to have a special squad of hunter nin devoted just to K the Fox Boy. Tsunade had known this would happen, but she also knew she couldn't allow her personal feelings to get in the way of what had to be done. She felt a presence behind her and turned to see Yumino Iruka standing nervously by the door of her tent. She gestured for him to enter, and he did, bowing quickly. Hokage-sama, I've been hearing some, the brown-haired Chunin paused, unsettling rumors around camp and wanted to confirm them with you. Is it true that you registered Naruto as a missing nin? Tsunade nodded. It now appears that he faked his own death to cover his betrayal. She finished sadly. Iruka looked at the ground sadly. In that case, Hokage-sama, there's something I'd like to give you. I want you to seriously consider it, please. He handed her a piece of paper before running out of the tent. Tsunade looked at what he had given her and her eyes widened. It was an application to join the Hunter Nin. Once again, Naruto found himself in a rather difficult situation. They had made decent time and were now only an hour or two away from a small town on the border of Sound Country. Temari had been thankfully quiet for the latest part of their journey, as Naruto needed to come up with some way to control her within the town. Glowing red arms grabbing onto people was the kind of attention he didn't want, so he would have to be subtler in populated areas. He knew that constant physical contact was out of the question. They both needed clean clothing and a bath. His answer came in form of an image from Kyuubi. Naruto knew the sand girl wouldn't like it, but that was probably why the demon had suggested it. He held up a hand and the two shinobi stopped, landing on the ground almost in unison. Temari turned to him with a glare, as he noted she always seemed to do. This meant she was at least less afraid of him now, though whether that was good or bad he couldn't decide. Why are we stopping so close to a village? The irate girl demanded to know. As I'm sure you know, Naruto said, it will be more difficult to watch you once we're in town. Temari had known that for days, she was counting on it and would be looking for a chance to escape. And you also know, he continued, that my normal methods of restraining you won't work. So, with help from Sere Kirit, I have come up with a solution. Naruto walked over to the girl, took the sword of her back and with a flick of AKCA. She of course, had something to say about this. What the hell do you think you're doing? Naruto grabbed her arm and calmly replaced the sword on her back. This way, he said, if you cause problems, the manifested restraints can go under your clothing. At this point, Naruto wasn't sure if she was red from embarrassment or anger. There is, of course, another option, but I didn't think you'd go for having to hold my hand 24/7. And if you don't try to run or K me, it won't be a problem either way. The unfortunate thing was that she had been planning on trying to escape or K him, or more likely both. Temari knew she had lost this battle, but she was determined to win the war. He would have to slip up eventually, she would be there when he did. The two shinobi jumped back into the trees and went on their way. They arrived in town rather late, so Naruto led his rebellious but tired prisoner to one of the first good hotels he saw. He could afford it, and they had been sleeping on the ground for 2 nights. He got a regular 2-bed room and quickly dragged Temari upstairs. Their odd appearance and gigantic sword had been drawing attention. Once inside, Naruto set down some rules. Okay, your leaving this room requires one of 2 things, either you're with me, or you've told me where you're going and you take Sere Kirit. Temari got annoyed, this place had public baths, or am I supposed to just not wash myself? Naruto did a few hand seals. One cloud of smoke later, he was a dark-haired girl. He had modified his usual no jutsu to include clothes. He grinned. Me or the sword, your pick. Temari had a choice between an annoying boy and a creepy sword. The sword didn't talk. She took Sere Kirit. Temari slid into the water still holding onto the sword. The bathing area was empty and she didn't want to give the blade any chance to restrain her while she was unclothed. Once she was settled, she held the sword up out of the water. She had never actually spent much time looking at it before. The handle was ordinary, but that was where normalcy ended. The blade reflected almost no light at all, no matter how she angled it. She moved on to the etching. It amazed her even now. Both sides were carved in a mirror image of each other. The carving was perfect, the two great monsters locked in combat truly looked alive. She started at the hilt, where the fox's tails started, and slowly ran her hand across the engraved image. Near the middle of the blade, the fox and dragon twisted around each other, the scene was obviously near the end of a battle, but Temari realized with a start that no one would ever know which one won the fight. The two would be forever frozen in the moment right before the victor was decided. Temari realized that she had never asked how or why the sword was sentient, she just accepted it. After all, her little brother carried intelligent sand around with him, so who was she to question an intelligent sword? But now she was curious. She sank deeper into the warm water and decided to ask him about it later. Back in the room, Naruto was smacking himself in the head. Naruto had been working over a map, planning their route to and through Lightning Country. Kyuubi grinned to himself within the sword. This was fun. He had never had the chance to do things like this before and it was a novel experience. Hell, though as Naruto started banging his head on the table, terrorizing these two was almost as much fun as obliterating a village. Almost. She estimated that he should have made at least 3 wisecracks by now. Temari stared at the ceiling for a few moments, but quickly found herself drifting off. She was awakened sometime later, but a silent glance at the clock showed it to be only 2 a.m. A lamp was on in the room, and a moment later Temari noticed Naruto sitting at the table in the corner. Kirit was leaning against the other side of the table and Naruto was studying something on top. Are you aware it's 2 o'clock in the morning? Temari half murmured. Yeah. Temari glanced at what he was studying on the table. Why are you playing chess with yourself? She asked. I'm not, came Naruto's reply. Who are you playing with then? Temari asked skeptically, but as she finished speaking, a clawed hand reached out of the sword and moved a piece. Temari blinked. Your sword plays chess. Naruto nodded. He's pretty good at it too. Oh. Temari paused for a moment. The question I'm leading up to here is why are you playing chess with your sword at 2 a.m.? Naruto took his opponent's knight with one of his bishops. Couldn't sleep. Temari paused again. Where did you get the chess set? Kyuubi took Naruto's rook with his queen. Stole it from the game room downstairs. Oh. Temari just sat there for a moment. She slowly got out of bed and wrapped a blanket around herself before pulling a chair up to their table and silently watching them play. The boy felt himself drifting in pleasant darkness. There was nothing here, no one to bother him. Suddenly, he heard rather screechy voices surrounding him, and started to notice that his left arm hurt. Shikamaru opened his eyes and sighed. Troublesome. The moment Tsunade heard Shikamaru was awake, she insisted all others leave the room so she could debrief him personally. She sat next to his bed on a foldable chair. So you're absolutely sure, the Hokage said, that it was a fox head that bit you? The shadow user nodded slowly. Yes, a red fox head. It appeared to be a chakra manifestation. Tsunade was impressed, but Shikamaru was both the laziest and most observant person she knew, so if he said it had been a fox, it had been a fox. She knew what that meant. She slowly walked out of the room and turned to the waiting Shizune. Naruto's status is now upgraded, he is now an S-class missing nin. He was the one who attacked the northern gate. Kyuubi is active enough to manifest. I want the best hunter nin and Anbu we have on this. The demon cannot be allowed to break loose. The great irony of course being that at that moment in time, the great demon fox was about as dangerous as a house cat without Naruto to give him chakra. Currently, Naruto was quite contentedly snoring in bed. Temari had woken up first and was already dressed. She had momentarily considered making a break for the door, but Kirit's presence mocked her, as if daring her to run. She looked at the sword again and out of sheer curiosity, started to count the tails on the fox. She had known there were more than 6, but never actually counted. 7.8.9.9 tails, a 9-tailed fox, something tickled in Temari's memory, a connection she had missed and couldn't get a hold of. She looked around the room and saw Naruto's wallet sitting on the table. It was a frog. Her eyes widened. Gaara. The girl pinned against the tree. Gaara transformed. The frog. The fox. Uzumaki Naruto. He must have left his village only a short time after she last saw him, after the failed rescue of Uchiha Sasuke. Almost everything about him had changed, but she was sure it was him all the same. This was the boy who had beaten her brother. The one who was supposed to be D. Temari suddenly thought of his new name. Fushaku Naruto. Of all her revelations, it was this one that stayed with her as she watched him awake. Naruto knew something was wrong the moment he woke up. Temari sitting on a chair near the end of his bed and was looking at him thoughtfully. She had never done that before. I want you to promise to answer a question truthfully, the sand girl said carefully. Sensing humor wouldn't be appreciated right now, Naruto just nodded. Temari took a deep breath. How did Uzumaki Naruto really do? Of all the questions in the world, that had been the one Naruto had been least expecting, but it was at least, he thought sadly, one he knew the answer to. He d, the boy said with a dark smile, from broken dreams and a broken heart. The both sat in silence for a few minutes, then Naruto quietly got out of bed, put his vest and shoes on, and slid Serekirat into place on his back. He walked to the door of their room and stopped. Temari stood up, put on her shoes, and they walked out the door together. Temari would later wonder what might have happened had she not followed him that day. But, she would then amend, it hadn't really been her decision. In that moment, whatever fear or desire to escape she had was overcome by a need to understand. And so she followed. Iruka stared into the mirror and the white mask that stared back. The decision to don the mask had been easy. Iruka knew Naruto better than anyone, so no one would be a better choice for hunting the boy down. The problems would arise, he knew, when he did find the boy. What was he going to do? Ask the boy to come back. As much as Iruka hated to admit it, Naruto had engineered an almost perfect fake death, one that had fooled the whole village for weeks. The problem was, that kind of planning was proof that his leaving had been premeditated, and not just spontaneous. There was no leniency in the law when it came to that type of treason. A shinobi who left the village in a way that suggested it had been planned was to be K on sight. Iruka didn't think he could live with that, he had to talk to Naruto first. The brown-haired man carefully removed his new mask and massaged his face. He would wait, and decide what to do when he saw Naruto. Gaara wasn't sure what to think. The news that Temari had disappeared in an attack by Naruto was both comforting and disturbing at the same time. Gaara was sure Naruto wouldn't hurt his sister, but that really didn't make the thought of his sister being held captive by a Nukenin, even Naruto, more likable. Kankuro hadn't taken it nearly so well, and had gone to vent his anger on some trees. Gaara stared up at the sky. He and Kankuro had been called back to Hidden Sand along with the rest of the Sand Nins. They would leave the next day. The sand swirled around him anxiously, he hated to leave without Temari, but she could be anywhere. He would have to trust Naruto to take care of her, and for the fox boy Sake, he better be trustworthy. Hiroshi ran through the forest, surrounded by his squad. The Hokage had deployed them 10 hours before. She had mobilized more than half the hunter nin for this. Squads were sent to all nearby towns, told they were hunting an S-class criminal named Uzumaki. Everyone, of course, knew what that meant. The demon child. As an added bonus, Hiroshi had heard that he had taken a sand girl along with him. Hiroshi had lost his brother to the war with the sand and figured that if his squad found them, he might have to engineer a little accident involving the sand nin. Naruto was now carrying his sword, as there wouldn't be any need to restrain her. They had come to a kind of unspoken understanding. She knew enough now that if she ran, he would probably be forced to hunt her down and K her. She knew he really didn't want to do that, and she didn't really want to D. They both knew she wouldn't run. And so she was now looking for new clothes. Naruto had given her 15,000 yen to spend, mostly, as she liked, and had gone off to buy traveling supplies. Temari had never been a shopping person, primarily because she always wore the same thing, but Naruto had insisted she get some pants and at least one regular shirt. She had growled for a little while, as she was very fond of her net shirts, but complied anyway. He was the one paying, after all. Naruto arrived back an hour later to see Temari looking rather stressed, but holding a shopping bag of clothes. Naruto himself was carrying a large duffel. Once they arrived back at the room, Naruto opened the bag and started pulling out its contents one by one, naming them as he went. Some new pants to replace the pair I lost, 2 extra light sleeping bags, new underwear, magnetic chess set, whetstone, dehydrated soup, a pot, pocky, soap, oh and, he pulled out a small package and threw them to her with a smirk. New hair ties. Temari glared, but it was half-hearted. Things were still slightly awkward between them. Temari had accepted that trying to escape was pointless. Eventually, she knew Naruto would let her go, but it still felt somehow wrong to be acting like the two of them were just two shinobi on a mission, when she technically was his prisoner. Naruto was getting nervous. She was looking at him thoughtfully again. The boy got refocused when he thought of the plan he had made the evening before. He pulled out his map and laid it out on table. This, he said, pointing to a small dot on the eastern border on Sound Country, is where we are now. Naruto went on to describe the approximate location of Hidden Cloud and the path they would have to travel to get there, but it was the end of his speech that made Temari jump. And when we arrive, I'm going to let you go. The boy finished, my village will figure out my secrets soon anyway, and the cloud has no hostilities with the sand, so you should be able to find your way home. Things didn't seem so bad all of a sudden. Temari now had a goal to work towards. It would be a week at least to Hidden Cloud, but it meant that she could be home in the sand within the month. Temari would have liked to leave that moment, but Naruto wanted to take a bath himself, which he had neglected to do the day before, and eat a meal in town, as it would be 2 days to the next one. The two paid the hotel manager and left right after dinner. Temari got to carry the duffel since Naruto had his sword to haul around, but she complained about it regularly, just to annoy him. The Nukanen and his prisoner were almost to the edge of town when they passed a small sushi shop. Above them on the roof, Hiroshi smiled as he looked at the picture in his hand. It was his lucky day. Naruto felt his shinobi sense tingling as soon as he passed the sushi shop, so it was with relative calmness that he shoved Temari into an alley. There were 6 hunters that he could see, and there would be one spotter somewhere. Naruto ran down the street, staying close to the buildings. Even hunters couldn't throw jutsus around in populated areas. He leaped into the air and spun, releasing Serei Kirit, before landing and running along a building wall while flashing through seals. The hunters scattered as the huge sword sailed past them, but failed to notice when it split into 9. Naruto jumped off the wall, landing on the ground just in time to catch his sword and go into a spinning S, dispatching a hunter who had tried get into close combat. A second hunter came at him from behind, while the other 3 tried to hit a vital point with their needles. Naruto snorted. These weaklings had nothing on Haku. He spun again, deflecting the needles with the flat of the blade and bringing it around to face the hunter who had tried to attack his rear. Serei Kirit flashed again, the second hunter fell. Apart from a few needles in uncomfortable places, Naruto was uninjured. 3 hunters faced him in the street, deciding how they should attack. He never gave them a chance. He let his body flow into the death stance and watched them freeze up in terror. They would be able to fight it off in a few seconds. Kyuubi didn't need half that much time. The sword shadow clones came from behind, as they had with Chuji. Without the added bulk of multi-size no jutsu, none of them stood a chance. Various pieces of hunter nin lay in the street, but Naruto wasn't paying attention. There had been 6. Where was the last one? He spun with a growl and ran back towards the alley. To say that Temari was shocked would be an understatement. She sat in the darkness between the 2 buildings with mixed feelings. She knew the presence of the hunter nin meant she was safe and could go home, but there was a part of her that would mourn the death of the odd boy she had spent 4 days with. A leaf hunter nin landed in front of her and offered her a hand getting up. She smiled sadly as she reached for it, but then noticed a glint in his other hand. It's a common misconception that in the game of chess, a player wins when he K the opponent's king. In reality, a player wins when his opponent's king is put in such a position where, no matter what he does, he D. Temari had one more move. Naruto arrived just in time to see Temari trip the final hunter and sak into his face. The mask split, revealing the man's face just long enough for him to whisper, "Sand B," and fall. Naruto rushed to catch Temari as she collapsed. She had just Ka Leaf Hunter, one sent to Ka Nukanen she was traveling with. Right now the spotter for the squad was rushing back to inform his superiors of what happened. Within 24 hours, she would be labeled as a missing nin. Hours ago she had been looking forward to seeing her village in under a month. She would probably never see her village again. But she was alive. There was nothing Naruto could say, so he just sat, soaked in B, and held her as she sobbed. Temari sat up against a tree, her arms wrapped around her legs and her eyes staring off into space. Naruto was starting a fire to cook a dehydrated rice dish he had picked up. Both were in an odd state. They had been running for 16 hours, and had been up for more than 24. Despite that, neither felt like sleeping. After finally getting the fire started, Naruto walked over and sat against the tree next to Temari. He grabbed a stick of pocky out of the package he kept in one of his shuriken holsters and started to slowly munch. Did you know, he asked the girl, that I once ate fried rice made by the third Hokage? Temari was silent. I've since then discovered, he continued, that much of a person's personality is defined by the food they eat. The third liked fried rice, which is basically made up of things that are healthy, but is fried in oil to make it just a little bit sinful. Temari turned to look at him slightly as he went on. Iruka, who you don't know, always ate ramen with me at a stand. Ramen is cheap, warm and filling. Iruka was always like that, never wanting anything in return for the kindness he showed everyone. Temari now had most of her attention focused on Naruto's words. Then, Naruto held up his snack. We have pocky, an inherent contradiction. A pretzel stick, covered in chocolate. These two sides make it almost impossible to define. It is neither good nor bad for you, neither sweet nor salty, it is ambiguous, it just is. Naruto took another bite. The first person I ate pocky with was AP who his family. He was also the person who taught me the skills that saved both our lives. These two sides seem impossible to reconcile, until you stop thinking in terms of good and evil. Naruto finished his stick and grabbed another. Yesterday, I killed 5 people from my old village in less than 60 seconds, but I needed to do it for us to survive. I don't think of myself as good or evil. I, like pocky, just continue to exist. Naruto took his pocky out of his holster and set it on the ground before standing up and going over to check on the fire. Temari slowly reached and took a stick out of the open pack. She set her head on her knees as she took a bite, smiling ever so slightly. Tsunade was tense. The camp was being packed and the shinobi were getting ready to head back to Konoha, and this meant making arrangements for all the making sure they had a way to get home. Shizune rushed up to her. Hokage-sama, we have another problem with Yamanaka Ino. Tsunade sighed. What this time? She was disturbing the other patients again. So, she does that constantly. She was explaining to another patient how horrible it was to try and find anything that looked fashionable in a wheelchair. And, the patient she was explaining this to had his face horribly scarred and both his eyes burned out by a fire jutsu. He apparently had a small mental breakdown after listening to her for 20 minutes. Tsunade swore, have a tune and watch her constantly, that girl has less tact than Jiraiya in a bathhouse. Shizune rushed off just as another shinobi rushed up carrying a scroll, which Tsunade snatched and started to read. Her face went white as a sheet. Gaara and Kankuro were just preparing to leave when a leaf Chunin ran up to them and whispered something in Gaara's ear. Our sister's been what? Gaara bellowed, causing every breathing being within 60 feet to freeze. Gaara was really fighting the urge to squish someone right now. He stormed through the camp, his sand spinning around him, picking up random things and flinging them around. He looked rather like a sand tornado. His storm was normally limited to picking up non-living things. Tents, chairs, packed boxes of this or that, but it also picked up the odd shinobi or small child, and most were rather displeased with being flung in random directions. He figured the Hokage would get complaints later, but really didn't care. Surprisingly, Kankuro was also fighting the urge to squish someone. He almost started setting off poison bombs the moment Gaara had told him. Though not as impressive as his younger brother, Kankuro was pissed as hell, and was following in Gaara's wake. Tsunade suddenly found herself exposed as a walking sandstorm disintegrated her tent. Can I help you? The Hokage asked politely. Instead of squishing her, he settled for his most menacing glare. Why has my sister been registered as a missing nin? Tsunade was getting nervous. She was reported to have K1 of the hunter nin sent to find Naruto. The whole squad less one was wiped out. Gaara continued to glare, and therefore, the last member must be the one who told you these lies about Temari. Tsunade was starting to squirm. Until I learn otherwise, I have to assume he's telling the truth. The sand started to swirl more violently and Kankuro stepped forward to back his little brother up if he needed it. Kakashi calmly walked between the Hokage and the demon boy, completely immune to the tension. The eyes of over 60 onlookers watched the copy ninja as he wandered off again, completely ignorant. Gaara growled. Kakashi had the mood. He spun on his heels, calling over his shoulder, "No sand hunters will pursue her, I will see to that. If you want to throw away the lives of your shinobi," Gaara grinned, "feel free." The sand user stomped away, wishing he was half as confident as he sounded. Temari didn't even have her fan, which meant she'd be mostly useless in any difficult fight. He was hoping his confidence might have thrown the Hokage off for a little while, but knew that even if his ploy worked, it wouldn't for long. Soon she would deploy the hunter nin again. Gaara had limited power, but he could stop the sand hunters and he could, and would, make the Hokage's life as difficult as possible. He needed to talk to Baki. The Hokage had sent the hunter's report to Iruka before she sent the messenger to Gaara and now strode purposefully into his tent to see what he thought. She then strode purposefully back out. A minute later, Iruka blushingly invited her in, but things soon turned serious. "Hokage-sama," the Chunin began, "before anything else, you must first promise that you will not send any other hunter squads to BS without consulting me." Tsunade raised an eyebrow at his presumptuousness, but nodded. "We have unfortunately," Iruka continued, "put Naruto in his most dangerous state. In taking the sand girl, he took responsibility for her, and now that she's been declared a missing nin, Naruto will blame himself for that too. That unfortunately means that Naruto will do anything to keep her alive. He isn't desperate, but he is ruthless, and no ordinary squad can fight him with any decent hope of victory." Tsunade let the Chunin continue as he shifted gears. "The first thing we have to do is clear up some misconceptions. Naruto is incredibly clever, and we can't underestimate him. From the report I read, he the hunter nin primarily with taijutsu, and very quickly, so we have no idea what types of ninjutsu he's picked up in his time away. Another point is Naruto's sword. Where did he get it? What does it do?" The report talked about the sword splitting into many and acting independently, as if they were controlled. That has to be looked into. Tsunade just stood there as Iruka continued to talk. "Next, the idea that Kyuubi is breaking the seal is absurd. If the demon is manifesting, it's to help Naruto fight, but we need to confirm that too. It sounds unlikely. As for the boy's changed appearance," Iruka glanced at the report again, "I'll explain that later. Right now, I need you to gather these people. This is the team we'll need." Tsunade ran her eyes down the list and looked slightly shocked. "But, this is..." Iruka nodded. "When we go after Naruto, we need those people, otherwise, it's useless." He dispatched 5 Chunin with only taijutsu. That skill, combined with the misjutsu he used in the attack on the North Gate, would allow him to fight even a Junin squad, but I can counter it if you give me the right team. Tsunade turned to leave, but Iruka had one more thing to say. "Oh, and Hokage-sama, I'll need the shinobi ID photos for Gaara and Sasuke copied onto clear plastic. Call me when everything is ready." Tsunade glared slightly. "You better have one hell of a presentation for us, Iruka." He looked at the ground sadly. "Oh, I will. Be sure of that." Naruto and Temari sat around their fire eating breakfast. Thankfully, both had been able to sleep the night before and were now not quite so tired. Naruto was currently trying to convince Temari that her life wasn't over, and unfortunately for her village loyalty, he was winning the argument. "I mean really," the fox boy was saying, "how many people in your old village were even decent to you? From what I hear, your life has been training and taking crap from the villagers." Temari didn't say anything since the only comeback she had come up with was that she kind of liked training. "I realize that you miss your family," he continued, "but I really can't see either of your brothers condemning you for this, and who cares what the rest of the village thinks." Temari was being swayed by his argument, but suddenly glared. "There is," she said, "the minor issue of spending your life being hunted." Naruto shrugged. "Gaara scares the hidden sand way too much for them to hunt you, and as for hidden leaf, they'll give up sooner or later." Sensing she was bending, Naruto went on. "Can you even remember the last time you did something fun? And I mean fun in a, not K-people, kind of way. I understand that you didn't ask for this, but there are many worse fates." Temari snorted. "Like what?" Naruto smiled. "Having a demon inside you." Temari stopped and looked at him for a moment. "I really can't argue with that, can I?" His smile became a grin. "No." She sighed. But even if I went along with being a missing nin, I'd need a new fan. Battle fans are only made in hidden sand, and even then, not many are manufactured. This, Naruto realized, would be a problem. But he had ways of dealing with problems. Wait a sec, he said, I need to consult with someone. Naruto let himself drop into a meditative state and soon found himself in the passages of his mind, the chibi fox already waiting for him. The fox looked absolutely ecstatic, and Naruto wasn't sure if this was good or bad. Kyubi got straight to the point, I have a sand battle fan, a very nice one too. But, of course, Naruto said, you want something in exchange. What? Naturally, the demon said, I want a greater chakra allowance. Tripled. Naruto looked at the demon carefully. Tripling his allowance would give the demon access to a quarter of his chakra. Deal, the boy said, how do we get this fan of yours? We need to summon a gate to my storage area. It's a relatively simple jutsu, it just requires a lot of chakra, and there's one other problem. That being, I need to be the one to do the jutsu, Kyubi said. Naruto looked at the demon suspiciously, why? The jutsu see through space, and the user has to know the correct seals, the address, so to speak, of wherever they're going. I'm not giving you a free pass to raid my ancient collection of treasures whenever you want. If you want the fan, I do the jutsu. Just stick the sword in any vertical surface, walk through the gate, grab the fan, walk out. Fine, Naruto agreed, but if I get the slightest feeling of being tricked. Naruto let the threat hang in the air and let himself come back out to the real world, where Temari was looking at him oddly. I was talking with my sword, he has a way to get a fan for you. Naruto said as an explanation. He walked through the forest, looking for a suitable surface while Temari asked a question. So who is it in that sword, anyway? Some shinobi that was caught on the wrong of a sealing jutsu or something. Naruto shook his head, still looking for a vertical surface. Nah, greater demon, more specifically, the nine-tails demon fox. Temari had stopped moving about 3 seconds before. The Kyubi no Kitsune is in your sword. Naruto looked at her oddly. Yeah, it used to be in my stomach, but a forbidden jutsu used in the forging of my sword changed that. Why? Actually, Temari really couldn't think of a reason why. It just seemed like having a greater demon in your sword was something to make a big deal about. So let me get this straight, the demon fox has a fan I can use. Naruto shook his head, you can have it, I'm giving him more chakra in exchange. And where exactly is this fan? Temari asked skeptically. Naruto held out a hand to silence her as he found what he needed. A large rock had broken in half, leaving a flat surface. He serré kirit into the rock and watched as it started to glow, then the sword sank into the rock as a black doorway appeared. Temari's jaw hung slack as Naruto calmly walked in. He found himself in what appeared to be nothing more than a large room with white walls. It was filled with, well, everything. Stuff was everywhere, but Naruto figured a huge fan couldn't be hard to find, and he was proven right a short time later as he hauled it out from under a pile of scrolls and what looked like a gold statue of an unnamed shinobi. Temari continued to stand frozen as Naruto emerged from the door a few minutes later, carrying a large fan. He turned as the door closed behind him and serré kirit appeared to grow out of the blackness until the door was gone and the sword was exactly where Naruto had it. He pulled his blade from the rock, replacing it on his back and handed the fan to Temari. It's amazing, he said, how useful a demon can be sometimes. Temari wasn't listening. She was in awe of what he had just handed to her. Temari had always used a basic battle fan, she had been using it for years, but had never been given a new one and had never complained. What she held now was a master's fan. The frame was dark metal, and the fan was a good foot longer than her old one. Nothing appeared much different on the outside, but Temari knew, when she opened it. With a subtle motion, the fan snapped open, and even Naruto took a momentary break from his babbling to admire it. The fan was painted to look like a sunset, and no inch of it was left uncolored. It was filled with reds and purples and pinks that made it look like the real thing. Temari hadn't known what the pattern painted on would be, but all master fans were painted to look like they lit the air itself on fire when swung. It was the most amazing thing she had ever seen. After his moment of admiration, Naruto went back to his ponderings about the many uses of having a demon. It was for that reason that, moments later, his brain shut down. In other words, Temari was giving him a hug. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.